Is this our name?
All right, we are live with the Deadly Analysis podcast. Hello, Gordon. Hello, listeners. How did that happen? That was weird. Welcome to our analysis and discussion of the 2001 psychological horror film Session 9. I'm here tonight with Garrett, Jonah, and Jim, and I think this film was Garrett's pick. I have notoriously given Garrett grief in the past for selecting this film. And for some odd reason, whenever I do, he just looks at me and goes, "Fuck you," like that. I don't know what that's about. It's really odd. I don't know why he chooses to talk to me that way. Weird. So before we hop into the movie, before we begin, there's a couple things I want to get out of the way. First, we're going to be discussing spoilers. So if you haven't seen this film, watch at your own risk. We discuss spoilers in every film that we analyze and talk about. Secondly, as a reminder to our new listeners, we approach horror films in much the same way we would like a good whiskey. We talk about our enjoyment of it, our enjoyment of the film, and then our appreciation of the film. So we distinguish between those two things. It's like when you drink a whiskey, you can enjoy it by drinking it however you want, ice, no ice, mix it with Coke, blasphemy in my book, but whatever, you enjoy it, drink it however you want. And then you appreciate it, which has an aura of a kind of objective appreciation. You may use a nosing glass, jot down particular tasting notes. So there's kind of a subjective component of the thing, and then kind of an objective appreciation of the thing, things like film style or the writing or the score, etc. So that's how we kind of approach horror films here. So Session 9 presents us with an asbestos abatement crew that has won the bid for an abandoned insane asylum. What could go wrong? Right? That's how every beautiful thing starts in your life. So we're introduced to the characters Gordon, Phil, Jeff, Hank, and Mike, who have won the bid. And for the most part, these guys are all buddies. Most of them have worked together quite a bit in the past. And what should be a straightforward, if rather rushed job is complicated by the personal histories of the crew. In particular, Hank is dating Phil's old girlfriend. That's not good. Gordon's new baby seems to be unnerving him more and more than should be expected. And so things just get more complicated as the would-be lawyer Mike finds and plays these tapes from a former patient that has multiple personalities. Her name is Mary Hobbs. And this all happens while, Mike is exploring the asylum. So one of those personalities of Mary Hobbs, as we find in these tapes, is the mysterious Simon, who doesn't actually appear as a voice until the 9th session of the recorded tapes. And I suspect Simon will be a major, maybe not a major point of contention, but certainly a major thing that we'll discuss in this analysis, because I think how we approach Simon, like the metaphysical reality, let's say, of Simon, will frame to a large extent what this movie is all about to each of us, right? Is it a film that's purely about the mental unraveling of a person that's snapped under pressure, or is there maybe really like this being, this entity that has the power to influence the weak and the wounded, so to speak, right? And, we had a similar discussion about this in our Babadook podcast, where we debated for like an hour, if the monster in the movie was an actual thing, if it actually exists within the narrative. So my 30-second spiel, my initial thoughts of the film, I've seen it 3 times now, and each time it's actually grown on me. When I first saw it, I couldn't stand it. I told Garrett this, and I'm notorious for talking shit about this film in other sessions of the podcast. I thought it was slow. There was very little payoff for me. I thought it was a little campy at times. And then in the last week, I watched it 2 more times. So it's been 8 years since I've seen it, and I watched it twice this week just to feel it out a little more. And, each time it grew on me. It's one of the few films that it really has gotten better each time I watched it. I think it's definitely a flawed film, but it has a lot of things that scare me in it. Like in a good, it has stuff in a horror film that scare me. So, for example, an isolated setting, a very slow burn of tension. This may be one of the slower burns in some of the horror films that I've seen. An unraveling of the mind, ambiguity of the monster, depending on how we look at Simon. Those are all things that I dig in a horror movie. They keep me interested. They keep me there. So I got that more the second and third time I watched the film. So I guess this is where I eat crow. I sort of owe Garrett an apology for giving him so much shit about this movie initially. I think I just didn't get it the first time I watched it. I think I may have just checked out at a certain point because it was so slow, which is a huge sin I've realized in some of these films. So I enjoyed it quite a bit more the last couple times I saw it. The stuff that did it for me really is the interaction between all of the characters. I think this time around, there's, you know, there's no monster jumping out from behind a corner. There's no ghost chasing guys throughout the asylum. And I think the key to unlocking why this film is so scary to people is just to look no further than Gordon. You know, the Mary Hobbs session tapes, I think, are to a large extent in this film an analog for Gordo and his own disassociation from reality after killing his wife and kid. So I guess we'll get into all of that. But that's sort of like my maybe minute-long spiel about the film. I enjoyed the pace of the film, the setting. I mean, actually, the setting absolutely made this movie, in my opinion. I think if they would have filmed this anywhere else, I don't think we'd even be talking about the film. So I enjoyed the mystery. There's a large element of mystery to the Mary Hobbs tapes. The movie's very investigative. There's a whodunit sort of vibe that counters maybe some of the longer sequences of dialogue that are hard to take, I think, for some people. So my 2 cents about the film. Enough about me. This was Garrett's pick. So I'm going to hand this over to Garrett. And Garrett, why don't you just tell us why you selected this film to discuss tonight?
Yeah, a lot to agree with about what you said. Again, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a perfect film. There's definitely some shortcomings. But at the same time, yeah, it is a film that I absolutely love. I first saw this film when I was in grad school. I actually didn't have any idea what it was going to be about. I knew it was a horror movie, but that was about it. I put it in late one night. I was planning on watching maybe a half hour of it and then maybe going to bed. And it just caught me and grabbed me. And not only did I finish watching the whole movie, after I finished it, I think this is the only time in my life I've done this. I got to the end and I rewatched the whole thing with the director's commentary right away because I had to get deeper into it. And it's been a favorite ever since. And it's also, I think, really underappreciated. It's part of the reason why I put it on the list, because I wanted to draw it to a larger audience than it has, because it's really, really good movie. So what do I think is so good about it? Well, again, repeating some of the stuff that you said, Noah, the setting is fantastic. There's a small number of films, in my opinion, where the location is a character unto itself. And this is one of those movies. In this respect, I would compare it. I realize this is high praise, but I actually would compare it to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, just in terms of how the location sort of presents itself to you and how it's, it sort of just envelops you and surrounds you. And again, it is an isolated setting again. So that's something I think is incredibly powerful about the film. Overall, I think it's well acted. Obviously, that David Caruso bit, which you've referenced a couple of times, the "fuck you" was a serious mistake on the director's part, editor's part, actor's part. I guess a lot of blame to go around for there. It's been sort of memed, and possibly for good reason. So there's that moment, and there's a couple other moments, I think, where the film missteps. But overall, I think the acting is solid. I love the pace. I love the soundtrack. I love the sort of the techniques and the devices, even though some of them have been done before. I think that they're like the recordings, for example, this sort of this old scratchy recordings giving us a window into the past. This film certainly didn't pioneer that technique, but I think it executed it very, very well. And then, of course, sort of the final reveal. I mean, I know that plot twists kind of get a lot of shit, but personally, if a plot twist can beat me, I love it. If I don't see it coming, and I should have seen it coming, then I feel that the film has sort of won a contest. And I love that contest of creative intellects. And this is one, again, I don't know if you guys were able to see the final twist coming, but I wasn't. Again, I was paying very close attention. I was deeply engaged, and the final reveal totally got me. I was not prepared for it at all, and that just absolutely thrilled me. So. Yeah, all things considered, just you put it together at the emotional tone and the cinematography, Joan, I think that's something you said that you liked a lot. I think this is an exceptionally well-made psychological horror film, and definitely towards the top of my list. Now, a few years back, I made Jim sit down and watch this film with me. And Jim, of course, is notoriously very, very nitpicky and critical about movies because it's kind of his thing. So
I would have never guessed.
So I want to hand things off to Jim now so he can give me his unvarnished opinion, because I think after we saw it, he was kind of trying to be polite to my feelings afterwards. And now he has no excuse to do that. So he can sort of tear into it and say his honest thoughts now.
Oh, that's funny. Because I was gonna take it easy, since not only are you still here, but you're also we're in front of other people. So any license that I have to be rude to you, I would be far more rude to you in private than here in public. No. So I watched the film a few years ago with Garrett, and I absolutely did not like it. I thought it was all the things that you said, no, in your beginning, that it was a slow burn and perhaps too slow. But more than that, I thought that the characters were flat. I didn't think that there was much personality to each of these people, and the conflicts between each of them seem incredibly surface. What is more, I think that Garrett and I, our movie taste is relatively similar. The Venn diagram of our movie taste is pretty. It's almost a circle. But there's one area I think where things that work on you don't work on me, and I think the biggest thing is that environment works on you, atmosphere works on you, things of that sort work on you, and that doesn't work on me. This is I'm about to piss off almost everybody watching and listening, but I've always said that if you replace the soundtrack on John Carpenter's Halloween, it's just a real estate video about suburbia. And there's the similar type of criticism that goes to Session 9. If
We suddenly got 10 dislikes in 1 second. I hope you know that. Yeah.
I'm checking that and seeing that none of them. But anyway, yes, that's. I would not be surprised if I get hate tweeted for that one. But no, and the same thing. The same thing is true here. I think that if you replace the soundtrack, which Garrett, you said you liked, I said it. Well, I haven't said anything about the soundtrack yet, but I'm about to. It didn't work for me. It doesn't. If you replace that soundtrack with anything else, it's just random shots of a legitimately creepy place, but not. I think you need more of a story here. I think you need more depth to the characters. And you compared it to The Shining. I think the people, the crazy shit that goes on in the Overlook Hotel has just as much to do with the creepiness of the Overlook Hotel than the hotel itself. You've got like Blowjob Bear running around The Shining, and here you have like a chair that's really coolly lit, but it's a chair. It's an evocative image, but it's a chair. Compare that to Blowjob Bear, and I think you see where I'm coming from. So that's. I've said a lot. I'll let all of you. I saw Noah at one point as I was saying things. You went.
I've actually just sent you a mail bomb as you were talking. Like, it's on its way. Be looking for it. I guess that defeats the purpose of a mail bomb. But like oh my god, like the sound is one of the things that for me, the music is one of the things that for me through and through all of my viewings, I thought kept me into it. So like the single piano key, you ever like there's certain horror movies that has a really light piano key, even a single piano key. And if that has to be done well, right? Like I feel like if you do that at the wrong time, or it's like salt when you put it on food. It has to be put on certain things in light amounts and peppered, and you can't just throw this sort of dark ambient actually music that was in this film. You can't. I guess I should say you can't take it away. Like I'd be hard pressed to think, Jim, what we would replace the ambient sort of atmosphere in this film with that would make it equal. Like, can you give me an example? Like what I maybe no music would have been for me. The only thing I can think of is there's certain horror films that don't have music. Maybe that would have done it given the isolation in this movie, given the setting of this movie. But to me, it made me eerie. It just felt eerie, made me creeped out rather. The eerie music and the sounds, it sort of added to everything, like overtly added to it. So like, what would you replace it with that you think would be up to par?
That's not my argument. I mean, that's not my argument. Isn't let's replace the music with like clown car music or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's if you're basing the entire length and breadth of your suspense on the music and on the setting, then you don't have much. What I want is deeper characters, deeper character conflict, and a little bit more to that interpersonal drama. My point about the music isn't that I want to replace it with something. It's that if I take that out of the experience, then I'm left with less.
All right, I'd like to say something. In science fiction movies, bear with me, I'm going somewhere with this. It's hard to notice, but there's always a hum of the engine, and there's a cut of Alien where you can hear the dialogue without the hum of the engine. Now, you can't hear the hum really, but you can definitely notice it's not there, and that hum totally adds to the depth and the eeriness of the environment. So I think that if you were going to have any music at all, just have the sounds of the institution they're in. That's scary enough. The echo, the sound of
well, it amplifies it, right? It amplifies whatever the setting is that you're in, I think, to a large extent. I feel like that would have worked in this.
There's two things I want to say. One is that there's a documentary called Exporting Raymond, where they have to bring everybody who loves Raymond to Russia. And so there's a scene where Philip Rosenthal is in the basement of this Russian building, and he goes, shh. If you listen carefully, you can hear the cancer, because it was such an old, decrepit building. So there's a Facebook meme that we've all seen that says, if you were asked to spend the night in this haunted house for $1 million, would you do it? And here's what I'm afraid of. One, that the house isn't actually empty. Bats, rabies, black widow spiders, black mold, asbestos, anything you'd find in an abandoned building in the dark, not ghosts, because the whole film goes into the fear of the dark. It's the environment. There again is the environment, but the sounds of the environment are far more terrifying. For the creepy crawly things, the sound of paint cracking, the sound of wind coming through the vents, the sound of water gurgling in tubs and baths, and then just dust settling on the floor. All that is far more horrifying than any music you could add to it. Even the most minimalistic, just piercing one note occasionally, just one piano key. So
do you think that would have made this film better, or did you enjoy the music in this? Did you think it helped? I felt it was subtle. It was ambient, but it was subtle. It wasn't like It Follows, for example, or Halloween or something, in which the music is very overt. Do you know what I mean?
The movie is so self-referential, with people sitting around explaining the plot to each other, that I feel like the music is there to tell you it's a horror movie. The music didn't make it worse, but it didn't add any depth to it. It just was like, you're scared now. It was like kind of like a Pavlovian response. Okay, that's chilling. You feel that chill? Cool. No? Oh, then wait, and maybe you'll feel it next time. It felt like it was a trigger.
It's interesting that we seem to be divided into two and two on the music here. I got to say, I think the basis of your complaint seems to me to be very, very strange. To say that, if you take away the music, then it just doesn't work. It's kind of like saying to me, well, if you just took away all the good acting, then that drama just disappears. Take away that wonderful cinematography and the emotional power just doesn't wash over you. Like, well, yeah, but that's how films work. It's one of the soundtrack is one of the central elements of a film.
The soundtracks, undoubtedly, I would be the first to admit, the soundtrack can make a film. It sometimes improves the film to such a degree that the soundtrack becomes the best character in the film. This was not one of those films for me. The music didn't really work for me in this film, but there's plenty of horror movies where the music is absolutely like devastatingly chilling or scary. It does have an impact on me. Now, bear in mind, and this could entirely be due to the fact that I had to watch this movie on a horrible rip that distorted the entire audio of the film. So I'm going to say I probably don't know what the hell you guys are talking about, because I heard a different note than everybody else.
You heard like the chipmunk version of the music too, actually.
Yeah, probably. Maybe it was like in a different key, a different note. So I probably saw a different movie because we both saw Session 9, but we saw completely different films.
Yeah, you were on a whole new level. You were on Session 10 or some shit. Yeah, that was. Go ahead, Jim. I'll let you respond to Garrett.
Yeah, once again, I'm not arguing against non-diegetic music. I'm not arguing against non-diegetic music in this film. What I'm arguing is that when I analyze this film, it's relying upon music and environment more than it's relying upon character interaction. And for me, I need character interaction. I need blowjob bear, naked woman in the bathtub, blood flowing at the, two crazy twin girls. Like, if you're comparing this to The Shining, those are the things that, and Lloyd, the shitty bartender, racist bartender, those are the things that really make the Overlook Hotel fucking creepy, not just the music that accompanies it in The Shining. So once again, not arguing that we should take the music out. I'm just saying that once I'm analyzing the constituent parts of this film, and I take away the effect that the music and the environment has on me, and only focus on the effect that the character interactions have on me, then I am left with a more shallow experience. Well, not a shallow. I'm left seeing this as a more shallow film, and it's not as compelling an experience for me as it is for those who the film's defenders.
It sounds like the indictment isn't so much like, when it's cashed out with you, it sounds like the indictment isn't so much the music was too heavy. It's that maybe the dialogue sequences and the character development were so poor that they overburdened these other elements that you sort of need everything to be in an equalization on, right? Like,
right.
Which is crazy to me, only in the sense that that was my criticism of the film, is that it was too heavily relied on, it was too heavily relied on dialogue and characters and interaction. And I thought there was complexity between the characters. These blue collar workers are coming in. There's clearly characters that have a past, an ongoing feud. There's one that clearly is unbelievably stressed. And I felt like the dance in their conversations was done well. It wasn't done, to me, it was done well. It wasn't done poorly. It made the movie, but it wasn't like, I actually felt it was the complete opposite of what you felt. I felt it was so strong that when I initially watched it in my first viewing, I saw it as a kind of criticism that it was too dialogue heavy. There was too many characters. That was one of my first criticisms of the film, is that there's too much going on between these characters. But as I watched it a second and third time, I sort of felt the dance a bit more between the characters. I think the acting made it particularly informative. The acting in this movie is fantastic. I think we'd all agree on that, except for the fuck you, which isn't really David Caruso's fault. Let's be honest here. It also allowed me to have tons of memes for social media when advertising this podcast. I just want to say tons of GIFs of it. So for me, it was so overtly the opposite of what you're saying, Jim, that I saw it as a criticism. So in other words, I saw it as like an opposite criticism of you. So that's really interesting that you found it to be the way it is, so that it impacted sort of the level that the music had for you, like the way everything danced with you. It seemed like one thing was much heavier than the other. I just didn't feel that way. Really interesting.
So let's use that to shift gears from the music
Sure.
to talking about the character relationships, because I think the character relationships are pretty compelling. Like there's the one scene where David Caruso's character Phil and Gordo, Peter Mullen's Gordo, are sitting and they're talking, and Gordo asks Phil, "What's the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life?" Right, and then he starts talking about his relationships, and then Gordo drops this bomb, like where he confesses that he hit his wife. And it's this incredibly shocking moment of incredible vulnerability and fear. He's like, I love my wife, but I hit my wife. And you see him on the edge and trying to open up to his friend, and his friend does not know how to handle it. He doesn't know how to respond to that. He's sort of drawn in. And I found that to be a very, very compelling scene. And the relationship between those two characters and other parts of the film too. I mean, you can sort of see the tension in so many ways ratchet up between them over the course of the film. I thought that was fantastic. And then Josh Lucas's character Hank, I thought was wonderful. You know, he's a sort of like laid back asshole that everyone knows. Everyone works with someone like this, and he's kind of likable, but he's also kind of a dick. And he sort of, you know, brings, you know, a sort of levity to, you know, not necessarily comic relief, but, you know, sort of at least a certain sort of something that pushes up from sort of the stress. And then, you know, what ends up happening with his character ends up being sort of this incredibly sort of crushing, haunting destruction, you know, because he ends up being lobotomized. And it's yeah, I thought there's some pretty compelling character relationships and character arcs there.
I'd like to come back to the environment if we haven't moved too far away from that.
Go for it.
So I'm going to say something kind of not nice, and then I'm going to say something very nice. Institutional horrors of films that take place in mental institutions, for the most part, are always dead giveaways that the lead character or one of the lead characters is insane. You basically know how the movie is going to end based on the fact that it takes place in a mental institution. That's not always the case, but quite often it is enough that it's kind of become a trope. But the nice thing is that there are many reasons for a film to take place in a mental hospital, but asbestos abatement is very interesting and unique because asbestos is a natural evil. It's natural evil that can cause that poses actual danger and harm, and it puts us into the realm of reality, out of the supernatural or even the historical. And it's a reality that we believe because that they have to protect themselves from, if that makes sense. And it's a permanent danger because as long as it's there, there's the realization that asbestos can cause you harm. And so that's something that connects to the historical context of the film. So asbestos in a way becomes a background character to the film, and it gives them actual reason and cause to fear and be there. They're not a cleaning crew. They're not filming a movie there. They're not just trespassing and they're being chased by scary sounds and rats. I mean, the asbestos in a way is kind of the second villain, but it's one that never comes into doesn't manifest in the same way.
That's really interesting. I never thought of it that way. I feel like maybe with that in mind, I feel like if this movie was shot in 2018, like if it was like a Blumhouse picture, there'd be like an asbestos monster or like Ghost or something, like dumbed down, like 2018 version of this film. There'd be like an asbestos ghost going after people, like breathing on them, like shit. You know?
Well, what's funny now is that it's not funny actually, is that asbestos is now a fear again in 2018. Now we're going to have asbestos abatement after the Trump administration, not to get political. I'm just saying that asbestos is now in the political discussion, and so it somehow accidentally became relevant.
Well, it's a very insightful comment because I think it goes to really like the heart of disagreement I've seen in this film. And if this is too big of a segue, you let me know and we can pull back. But the biggest disagreement I've seen in this film on Reddit and other forums and on like fan theory sites is the idea of whether this was, and I said this in the intro, if there really was a monster in this film, if Simon's a real entity. And I think if we look at what you're saying, it sort of underscores the idea that the natural, to a large extent, can be just as horrifying, if not more horrifying, than a monster in a horror film, that there are these natural evils, as you called it. And there's a lot of horror films that we've gone over in this podcast that have this as an element in them. And I think they're some of the better ones, actually. So it's really interesting to think of this as a purely naturalistic movie, that if there is no Simon, that this person really is mentally unraveling, and that's all there is. It's sort of, you could probably find other elements of this film that underscore the idea that everything bad that happens is a natural thing. And on to the point that you made about, insane asylum films having very obvious tropes, that's totally true. What I liked about this movie is that it made me think those tropes were coming, but then handed me something very different. I immediately thought, for example, that Gordon had been a previous inmate. An insane asylum patient. That was my first reaction. It was so overt that I felt really dumb Like by the end of it, I just felt had in a lot of ways. So that was the first one. Obviously, the ghost following them around. Maybe we can get into the deleted scene, the notorious deleted scene on the DVD. I don't know if you guys are aware of like the alternate ending. There's an additional character that they filmed and took out for. Are you guys aware of this? Garrett, you must know this.
I don't know what you were talking about.
Okay.
I saw it when I first viewed the film, like related back in 2001 when it came out, but it's been so long I've actually forgotten about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where I was going with this. Yeah, I like the idea that this movie sort of shifted that on me, like that trope, which is good. It sort of put that trope on its head for me. I think there were some elements of tropiness that that this movie actually had. Yeah, the distinction between sort of natural evil and supernatural evil is an ample part of, I think, discussing this film. I'm curious to see where you guys land. I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but I'm curious to see where you guys land on that.
This movie could be an OSHA training video for asbestos abatement, and just have that be it, and then just leave it at that.
Okay, actually, I want to say before we move on really quickly, I do want to say something else about the atmosphere since Jonah brought it up, and I want and Jim mentioned it too because it's the chair. Something which you might not realize just watching the film is that they did almost no set design for this film. This place was a real place, Danvers State Mental Hospital in Massachusetts, and they filmed the movie there. They just basically came into the place and did very, very little to change it, and just shot what they found. So that chair that you mentioned, Jim, it's on the poster. That's something that was like that they found there. Now, I mean, I grant you there isn't necessarily some sort of cosmic significance to it, some greater overarching theme to it. But I mean, just think about the story that tells. It was a wheelchair of sorts that was carrying God knows how many mental patients through this snake pit over time, and it just gets abandoned there. And it's the history that calls out through the literal walls of the institution that's part of what sparks my imagination. So yeah, I mean, it's not so much that the thing in and of itself is scary, so much as that what it invites you to imagine about the past of this place is quite terrifying.
I feel like I hear you, and that's a great point, and one I hadn't considered. And I feel like that historical context is so buried in the paper thin plot that it disrespects that heritage. It should spend more. Look, it doesn't have to be a documentary, but the environment they're in is terrifying enough, as I said, that they could have focused more on the actual things that they were filming, rather than working those props into their story, making them the story. So like I don't know, like Blair Witch Project comes to mind in a way, how it could be completely fictionalized, but using that, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but using that environment would do a better job of conveying terror because it actually happened.
I'm gonna let Jim go here in a second, but before I do, I want to say that this film has actually been compared to Blair Witch in a lot of ways, precisely for what you've just said, Jonah. And we did have a comment in the chat that said that may be important, that said budget might have played into this aspect or not, what we're talking about here, which is interesting. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I mean, just about that real quick, Garrett, I think you told me back when we watched this a few years ago that that they found the place first and then decided to make the movie based upon the place they found. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the inspiration was twofold. So Brad Anderson, the director and co-writer, he grew up in Boston and he drove past the institution several times on the highway, and so he saw it off in the distance, and so it had sort of lingered in his mind. And he took like a urban spelunking thing in which he explored it, and that was a big part of the inspiration. But the other half of the inspiration, and this is again something that I absolutely love about this, is that the basic story of Gordon was a true story. There was some guy who worked, some bureaucrat or something like that, worked in Boston. His wife had a miscarriage, and he came home one day, and she spilled dinner or something like that, and he snapped and killed her and butchered her, and then went back to work the next day as if nothing happened. And then a week or two later, they found out what happened. They arrested him. They asked him why he did it. And he had no recollection. He had absolutely no memory of having done this. Now, I didn't know that specific fact the first time I saw the movie, but I did know that basic psychology is real. And that kind of I mean, the psychology in this film is actually spot on. I mean, I don't know if they had researchers, but it's quite accurate to the sort of clinical, both the historical and the clinical aspects of it. So yeah, so that happened, and then when you think about it that way, the extra layer of horror that adds onto it, it's that really just about anybody could be Gordon. You know, I mean, if you have just the bad day, the wrong day, the pressures line up against you somehow, you could snap and do something absolutely horrifying and have no memory of it whatsoever. And if that's not fucking terrifying, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a theme that we talked about with the bug, and that's a theme that resonates with me as well. But I guess so. One of the we were starting to talk about the characters, and Noah, you said that you found the character relationships to be compelling, although at some points you thought it was too talky. If I'm summarizing your opinion,
yes, and I think the technical term for that is blue collar compelling. I think is maybe the technical science. That was a joke, but it was compelling for kind of blue collar conversation. Maybe that's why we looked at it maybe differently. Was it was a little. Yeah, I mean, it kept me interested, but I don't know. I've been on cruise like that where it's kind of like that's sort of the way that I'm not asbestos, but plumbing specifically, where it's like in construction work, where it's kind of like, that's normal conversation, but in between all of that normal conversation and bullshit and fucking around with each other, you actually get to see some depth in these characters. I mean, even the youngest kid who's new on there who looks up to Gordon, I felt that was compelling. So anyway, yeah, I'm gonna call it blue collar compelling, blue collar. Empathy.
Well, I mean, and blue collar characters can be very compelling. I mean, Bug is rife with blue collar characters. But I wrote down the three main conflicts that I think are the centerpiece of this film, and I'll talk. We could talk about like one at a time, and I'll give maybe my reasons why I don't find these conflicts to be particularly compelling, and then hopefully all of you can convince me of how wrong I am and how awesome this movie is. But the first one I see is the conflict between Gordy and himself. So my reading of this film says that there has to be some sort of well, let me go back. Let's talk about Gordy versus himself later. I'm sorry, I wasn't. Let's talk about Gordy versus Phil first. So the main conflict we have is Gordy versus Phil. Phil believes we get one expository line where Phil extols Gordy's virtues, says that previously he has been unflappable, but now things are looking a little shaky. So I think Phil's objective in those scenes is to get Gordy back on beam, and Gordy's objective in those scenes is to get Phil, get help from Phil for Gordy's own internal conflict, which I think we should talk about a little bit later. That conflict doesn't, I think in order to have that conflict have the full amount of dramatic weight, I think we need to see Gordy have it all together. And the first scene that we have with Gordy, he's basically begging this guy to let him and his crew have the job. He seems really desperate when we first meet him. And he continues to be even more desperate and even more unhinged as the film goes on, which isn't, and all of Phil's methods to try and get Gordy back on beam are ineffectual, or there's not much time given to Phil's attempts to resurrect Gordy in any way. I think the scene that you referenced earlier, Garrett, what's the worst thing you've ever done? And Phil says, well, I probably shouldn't have introduced Hank to Amy. And then Gordy said, well, I hit my wife. I think that at the end of that scene, if Phil really says, no, Gordy, you need to stop that. What the fuck's the matter with you? Come on, man. You never do this. What's going on? Like, if there was even more tension and even more energy behind that scene, rather than Phil going, fuck, I don't know what to do with that shit. I think there would be, I think we have more of a dramatic arc for that character. We can talk about some of the other ones that I've noted later, but I want to sort of pause to give you guys a chance to talk about the Gordy versus Phil conflict and whether or not I'm reading it wrong or reading it in a different way than you are.
I mean, to me, I think the reason why it would be interesting to see your choice, right? To watch Phil react more potently, but I thought the choice that was made worked very much because, yeah, that's terrifying. I mean, if a close friend of mine, colleague of mine who I've known for a long time tells me that he's started hitting his wife, I don't know how I would react. I think that would terrify me. Yeah, I would think, holy shit, my friend is losing it, and I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help him. I'm suddenly quite afraid, not just for the job, but for everything. So to me, that's Phil's reaction is fear, and it's an understandable fear. So I found that quite compelling myself.
Not only is it appropriate, it's also more tense. I mean, to me, if there's an immediate arguing back or trying to help or even dialogue, it takes away from sort of the moment, the harshness of the action, the fact that a friend who's that close isn't entirely sure how to respond. That adds a kind of not only does it show the susceptibility of Gordon, and to a certain extent make you want to empathize with him, but I saw myself trying to ask myself the question, if I was Phil, how would I even respond to that? I wouldn't know what to say. What do you say? It's going to be okay. Anything you say, I mean, is going to make the conversation, the scene, let's say, less tense. I wouldn't say less meaningful, because there's plenty that Phil could say that would fill the gap. Phil would fill the gap. But I just, sometimes the best response is not saying anything, not knowing what to say, and letting that sit, letting something sit. That subtlety enhanced that scene way more to me. So I just completely disagree with Jim, and I'm angry at you, Jim, because I was supposed to be on your side. I originally hated this film. There's previous sessions where I've talked so much shit to Garrett, and I said, when we do our session 9 one, Garrett, I'm going to be on you. And now I'm just agreeing with Garrett. So yeah, there's God's dead. What can I say? This makes no sense. Anyway.
But you made the mistake of rewatching the movie twice.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's not a mistake. If you like a movie, that's a good thing. I'm not, and if you have a criticism of a movie, that's a good thing too. So I disagree. We can go. I disagree, not as you guys are responding as though you are humans in this situation, and your best friend can confess this thing and you wouldn't know how to respond. And that's fair. What I'm responding to is, if I'm looking for to accentuate the drama of this film and accentuate the deepness of these characters, then I think I need more from Phil than first not being able to respond in the car, and then later sort of betraying Gordy to Mike by saying, well, we need to get someone else on this job. We need to give Gordy some time off. He's fucking hitting his wife and shit. He was
saving it all up, Jim. He was saving all that emotion up for the fuck you. That's why the camera pans in on him. All that emotion going back and forth with Gordon. He could have said so much, but what he did is he saved it, and it just all came out in that fuck you scene. That's my theory.
All right. Well, that's. I think that was just an excuse to have David Caruso do a David Caruso thing. All right, let's move on to what I'm identifying as the second conflict, and that's Hank versus Phil. Hank is sleeping with Phil's wife, or ex-girlfriend. Phil's not too happy about that, and that's all that could be said about that conflict. That's the extent of Hank's character in his relation to the other characters there. And so when I argue that the conflicts of this film might be relatively shallow, I don't know. I think that one's a little inarguable, but maybe you disagree.
I mean, I would say certainly that's not a deep conflict, but I kind of saw that as a bit of a red herring, is how I interpreted that. I thought that was going to be a bigger conflict, but once it didn't develop into one, I think it's kind of like what Noah said about assuming that Gordo was going to have been a former patient. It was a way of misdirecting you, the looking at something else, so that you didn't see what the heavy shit that actually ended up coming down the pipeline. So that was how I read it.
Okay. All right. Fair. Yeah, that red herring didn't work for me. Mostly, I'm just waiting for that conflict to come for there to be an arc associated with that conflict. Okay, so the third one that I identified was Mike versus the mystery. And that's basically Mike trying to look through the session tapes to figure out what's going on here. And Mike versus the mystery is there, to my mind, that conflict is there to inform the Gordy versus himself conflict. That there's, and we also get this, we going back to the environment, we get this satanic imagery on the walls. There's an idea about some sort of possession, possibly satanic rituals going on in the exposition dump that Mike has at the beginning. So this mystery doesn't reach too much of a fruition for me until we get to the session 9 tape, and then we get revealed that there's this Simon character. Now, Noah, you referred to this earlier, and basically our understanding of Simon will, in your mind, inform how we understand the rest of the film. I'm having some trouble placing Simon within the context of of the larger structure of this film. So what I'm struggling with, what I think I understand about this film, is that Simon is this entity that took over the Mary character and possibly is taking over Gordon, and then that's why he sort of kills his wife and all of that stuff. Is that the way the rest of you read it, or how does that jive with what your interpretations of Simon are?
I'm not sure, but I did make this one note that I think may lead to a deeper discussion. 9 sessions, 9 levels of hell, question mark. So, 9 circles of hell. So I wonder if that relates, and I wrote that early on into the film before. It's one of my earlier notes, but I wonder as the tapes go on, as the mystery unfolds, and as it gets deeper and we get closer to the climax or nadir of the story, as it would be, does that comport in any way? Is there some sort of even thin connection between the 9, between descending deeper into hell and the tapes?
I think the only connection there would be, I think it'd be a surface level connection, maybe related to like the graffiti of the pentagram and the 666, but I think that's as far as it goes to me. I didn't really,
like I said, but
yeah.
I feel 9 is not an accident. Nothing is accidental in movies.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, it's worth noting,
written, but they're not accidental. What's that?
I was going to say, it's worth noting for the record that the original title of the film before they changed it to Session 9 was The Hidden Altar, as in, the alternate personality. And she was, Simon is going to be the hidden altar. And then they didn't like that one and they changed it to Session 9. So for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, so I think I understand what Jim is saying. I mean, so Simon, to me, God, Jim, I have the complete opposite interpretation of everything you've said so far tonight, which is interesting. So Simon, to me, was very clear, right? So you have, let's think of the characters that Mary Hobbs, the personalities rather that Mary Hobbs is going through, right? There's the princess, which is, as he notes, as Mike notes, childlike innocence or something like that, and she speaks through the tongue, right? That's her realm. Her realm is the tongue talking. Billy's the other alternative, alternate personality, and he's kind of like a childlike protective, and he's in the eyes, right? So he tries to protect Princess from seeing the things that she's seen, right? So you have the tongue and the eyes, you have the princess and Billy, and then Simon comes in at the very end as being. Simon is very different. I get that. So far as it's a criticism and it's a little funky, Simon's funky, I think it's because Simon is. You can argue that the princess and Billy are definitely a part of Mary, but there's a question mark over, is Simon a part of Mary, or is Simon a distinct abstract entity, right? And I think the film, to me, the cat out of the bag thing for the film to me is that I get the idea that Simon actually is a distinct entity, because when we first see Gordon enter the asylum, Gordon hears "Hello, Gordon," and there's no tape playing. And to me, that was enough. There was enough weight on that made me sort of fall into the camp of people who thinks that Simon was a real thing. And I like that interpretation better because Simon is very ambiguous in this. We don't know what Simon is. We don't know any. I mean, it wouldn't even be fair to call him a demon, to call him any. We don't know what Simon is. Simon is this ambiguous thing that is able to both talk to Gordon and to Mary. That's enough for me to make me think that, you know, it's not a personality, a particular personality of Mary Hobbs. But in terms of Mary and the session tapes serving as an analog for Gordon's disassociation from reality, I thought that Simon's place within that context was the most clear personality, right? Childlike innocence, how does that relate to Gordon? We can make some arguments. Childlike protecting your family, right? How does that relate to Gordon? We can make some arguments. There's some connections there. But I don't think those connections are as thick or as obvious as Simon, because Simon is the thing that the film wants us to believe is what took over when Gordon slapped his wife, hit his wife. Simon is the thing that came over Mary Hobbs when Mary Hobbs killed her brother and her parents. You know, so, you know, Simon is that thing that talks to both Mary and to Gordon. And to that extent, we could say one of two things. Perhaps Simon is a distinct entity that is there within the confines of, let's say, the insane asylum, a kind of grudgian sort of Sam Raimian sort of thing, where, you know, it exists in the area of the weak and the wounded. And if you're susceptible to it, when you walk in, it takes over. Right. So there's one interpretation there. And I think that analog would work if we look at it that way between Mary and Gordon. The other way to look at it is that, really quickly, the other way to look at it is just that Simon is the thing in all of us that says, go ahead and do it whenever shit gets really hard and you want to do that thing that you know you shouldn't do and you're under pressure. It's not necessarily a person, but it's that desire, that fear, that thing that's in there, that's psychological, purely naturalistic, psychological component, right? It's the, to get poetic, the asbestos in all of our minds. I just threw that out there, probably no connection. But yeah, like, so I guess what I would say to Jim is that so far as Mary Hobbs and the session tape serve as an analog for Gordon, I actually think where Simon comes into play, it's the most obvious, not the least obvious or problematic or anything like that.
Well, I mean, I agree with most of what you said there. I guess what so I think we're not actually on opposite sides of this argument. What I do think is that there can be some other interpretations about what Simon is, and then the relationship between the Mike versus the mystery conflict and the main conflict of the film, Gordon versus himself, isn't altogether clear until the very, very end. And even then, we're left with some loose ends. I'm okay with that ambiguity, but when we've gotten less to hang on to up until that point, I think I find that to be lacking in the film a little bit. But go ahead, Jonah.
All right, so this is not really going to be substantiated by anything, but I had an interesting thought about what Simon might be. And this is going to kind of tie things together. Now, as I said, one of my favorite aspects of this film was the cinematography. And there are two shots in particular, two scenes, which stood out to me the most. One is when I'm guessing Gordon was looking up at the stairwell and he's surrounded by pitch black in the background where a wall ends. And then a light traveling down the hallway, and it's almost like it's a clear dividing line. It's almost like it was like two shots put together. So it's very stark. It's literally,
it's on Garrett's screen. I'll show it.
Yeah, it's black. Hold on, I want to be on. Yeah, okay, so it's like black against white. And it's very literal. A first-year film student would look at that and say darkness against, the light against the darkness. The second was the scene when the young kid was running down the hallway who's scared of darkness. And now usually light terminates into darkness. It's the light where suddenly the darkness is at the end of the hallway. But here it's the other way around. The darkness is chasing him like a ghost. like an actual entity. And I'm saying that between these two things, the darkness behind Phil is Simon. The darkness chasing Jeff is Simon. Darkness, lack of light, is a natural occurring phenomenon. It's actually the thing that precedes light. So again, like it's an eternal, that first there was darkness, then there was light. So Simon is present in the absence of us seeing him. He's everywhere. He's the darkness behind Phil. He's the darkness chasing Jeff. That fear that's chasing Jeff. And so that's what I'm saying, that it's Simon. I'm not saying the darkness is I'm not anthropomorphizing him, but I'm saying that it's that fear, the mind, the unknown is what, and the darkness within ourselves, it's what's permeating the walls. This is very film studies. It's very self-masturbatory, but it's it's kind of how I would, if I were to have to write a 5-page paper on the film, I might go there.
Yeah, I have the screenshot up on Garrett's thing. There you go. Darkness and asbestos. That should have been the tagline for the film, Jonah. Darkness and asbestos. We have a comment in the chat that says from Greg Chaos, that says Simon as an external threat is the most terrifying aspect of the movie. It triggers the same fear that possession invokes, some unknown force infecting otherwise good people with evil.
Okay, I like that, and I like Noah, the case that you made because Gordo hears the voice when he comes in. I think that's an interesting argument, but for me personally, I feel the exact opposite way. One of the formative experiences I had when I was a kid growing up was watching Scooby-Doo. And, it was one of the things that always stuck me about Scooby-Doo was like, it always looks like it's supernatural, but then when you peel back the veneer, it's really just people. It's really just human beings. It's really just human nature that's really behind it. And that to me is always scarier. And I hate it when horror movies try to pass themselves off as based on a true story, and they involve something supernatural, because dyed in the wool naturalist here. I think the natural world, the asbestos, if we're going to keep running with that, is the scariest thing. And again, like I said, I previously praised the psychology in the film. The satanic horror ritual abuse syndrome, all that happened. Crap, when you scramble someone's brains, what's it called?
Lobotomy.
Lobotomy. Thank you. Yeah, I lost the word for a second there. The lobotomy, all that's real. All that stuff was very much actual and practiced, and institutions like this were genuine snake pits that did horrible things. And I find that reality, that actual history, to be a much more sort of compelling backdrop to a fictional story that sticks to that reality. And again, like I said, the story of Gordo snapping was based on a real case. And to me, I find it a lot more terrifying to think that, any one of us, not that we're going to be visited by a demon and transformed into a killer, but rather that something about ourselves as we exist as human beings just could somehow turn on us and make us do something terrible to someone that we love.
But
that to me, I find much more terrifying than the idea of a ghost or a spirit or something out there living.
But what happened at the hospital is far more terrifying than any story you could have written, unless the story you're writing is what happened at the hospital. If you were going to do a horror film at Auschwitz, right? Like, no matter how terrible the situations are in the film, Auschwitz far exceeds whatever the film could attempt to do. The background of Auschwitz is more terrifying than the movie is going to be. So what happened at the hospital, I think, is just much more interesting and terrifying story, because it was real than.
But again, a lot of this movie is real. I mean, again, what happened to Gordo was based on a real case. Now, granted, there was no asbestos team and all that stuff. That aspect of it is fictional.
I may have missed that part.
It's precisely because it is not just real, but realistic to me, and it gets the psychology right. That I find, that's something that makes this film very, very.
We talked at the beginning of the podcast just about spoilers, and watched this film, but again, I watched a crap version of it, So I'm going to ask you, for the sake of me and for the sake of spoiling the film, assuming that our audience has already seen it, can you explain the ending twist again for clarification for me and for anyone else listening?
Sorry, I'll give you my take on it. So I will agree with Jim on something here. I did think that one of the weaknesses of the film is that it's the character Mike that discovers the tapes, and he's the one that's listening to him. He's kind of, at that point in the film, at least, somewhat of an extraneous character, and he does seem to only exist so we, as the audience, can hear the tapes. And that, I think, is a bit of a shortcoming. It would have, at a minimum, it would have been nice to have had Mike's character more deeply involved in the events in the final act of the film, rather than just sitting there listening, and possibly the second act too, rather than just sitting there listening to the tapes. But I think, that point being acknowledged, the function of the tapes, again, to me, is at least threefold. One, it's just to set the mood, to be creepy and scary, to further sort of show the backstory and the reality of this scary ass mental hospital. Two, to sort of shed a light on, again, this basic idea of, dissociative identity disorder, or as it used to be called, multiple personality disorder. To show that it was real. Here was a patient who had this condition, and now Gordo has sort of fallen into that same condition as well. And then third, it establishes these characters, of Mary, Mary Hobbs, and then her various altered personalities, sort of as independent characters in and of themselves. Even though they're not on screen. I mean, I think one of the things I love, again, talk back to cinematography, is that we hear Mary Hobbs talking for so long until we finally see a shot of her in her files. And it's like, after hearing her talk, and then the camera pans over and you finally see what she looks like, it somehow, fleshed her out to me in a way that was deeply disturbing and very, 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 very scary for me. So that final bit at the end. Another piece of trivia quickly. That final line, which I really like, and no, I take it you did too. I live in the weak and the wounded. The original line in the screenplay was going to be, I live in the gut, to keep everything sort of anatomical. I live in the mouth, I live in the eyes, I live in the gut. But again, the screenwriter sort of decided that they wanted to break the symmetry, the anatomical symmetry, to go off into something that was a little bit more.
But it's similar, right? But that's the thing, is like, it's the same message, right? I live in the snap decision, the instantaneous, the thing I feel initially in my gut, right? The thing I want to do fast without thinking, right? Which I think is cool.
So I get that Gordon killed his wife, but the whole wake up Gordon, what's the twist that jarred you?
Oh, well, one of the things which you may not have noticed, I mean, again, it's something else I didn't notice, but when in that final scene, when David Caruso's character is calling him on the walkie-talkie, there is no sketch. Normally, like when you hit a walkie-talkie, there's that starts off, it lets you know it's talking. You don't hear that, because he's not actually using the walkie-talkie.
That was all Gordo. That was all Gordo.
Caruso's dead, and it's just in his head. And I thought that was a real nice touch.
Wait. So Phil is dead too, then?
Phil is dead in the final sequence.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's
Everybody died.
The whole movie. It's not like the whole thing was all in his head, right?
No, not the whole movie.
No.
Just at the end.
Yeah, that's Identity.
Oh God, don't mention that piece.
Go ahead, Jim. I know Jim had a lot to say to Garrett. Go for it.
So Garrett, for you, this film is the story of somebody who, because of human frailty, because of the darkness that, or perhaps even just because we're often emotional actors, this is the story of somebody who snaps, does something terrible, feels awful about it, and then does more awful, and then what? Like, is that
that's the Machinist,
the crux of the story for you?
Well, The Machinist was also directed by Brad Anderson.
Oh, right. And that's like somebody did something horrible, and the whole movie is about the regret and furthering that, making a bad situation worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously it's a theme that Anderson likes to play with.
By the way, I liked this movie more when I realized 15 minutes, like halfway through it, that I was like, oh, this is the same dude. I like The Machinist. I don't like this movie, but I like The Machinist. So I like it more knowing that he did The Machinist. So
that's interesting. Sort of inherited appreciation. But
Yeah.
Jim, so to answer your point, again, it's that, I mean, again, it's no longer the correct term, but multiple personality disorder obviously is what they're sort of playing with here. And Gordo didn't just snap and do something terrible. Gordo snapped and had a disassociative episode where a different, a different aspect of his person came to the forefront and took control, and that never goes away. That's sort of, maybe it does with therapy or something like that, but for the purposes of the film, it doesn't go away. It's there the whole time. It just doesn't come out again until the end. So he's been taken over at the end, and the killer in him, the killer personality, alternate personality, his Simon, if you want to put it that way, is the one that does the terrible thing. Does that at least parse the?
Yeah, that answers my question. And I guess for me, by itself, that's a compelling story. I don't think that this is the best version of that story, though. Partially because I need to see a better point A to go to the point B. I need to see something. I need to see Gordy at his best, and then watch the slow decline. Or the quick decline, or the whatever decline. Like I think I need to see more of a point A, and that's where I think the film, the depth of the film's characters would. I think I would see more depth in this film's characters if I had seen a little bit more of the point A. I by itself, I think the story that you're telling about this film is better than the film, which I think is a thing that I've said before. But a lot of this is stuff that we talked about with Bug, and if we're comparing the two films, we see a real point A with Agnes, and then a definite decline to a point B by the end of it. And so putting these two films in conversation with each other, I think that obviously Bug has a leg up in my view, but go ahead.
I disagree staunchly. I mean, I think that the character arcs between Agnes and Bug and Gordo are very, very similar. I mean, I don't think we may be seeing Agnes at her best at the beginning of Bug, but she is not at all good. She's in a very bad place. And while Gordo definitely is in a bad place too at the start of it, I agree. You're not seeing the sort of the complete decline and fall, but based on how the film is paced out, it kind of has to work that way. But I think you do see him in a point A, to use that terminology, when you see how remorseful he is about hitting his wife. I mean, you see so much empathy. So he's so sorry, he feels so bad. He's calling her saying he wants to come home. And that's him at his best, as it were, in the sense of his most sympathetic, his most empathetic. And then the flip side, the homicidal mania is the downside.
Yeah. And mind you, I'm not saying that Agnes was the ideal citizen at the beginning of Bug. Obviously, she needs to start off in a very lonely and very desperate place, and then go even further. And once again, I'm not necessarily arguing for a purely linear story. What I'm arguing for is it seems like Gordy starts at point A, and his point B is pretty close to his point A. He starts out very remorseful. He starts out in a desperate place. He starts out in this rather precarious position, and I don't see much of an arc to his character. That's my argument, is that there's not enough. And if you want to make it a plateau, if you want to make it, just a steep decline, if you want to make it a sudden snap, I don't care what you do. I just need to see more of him at the beginning to solidify this as a downfall for me. A tragic arc, if you will.
So a couple things. Sorry, I was typing to our chat. A couple things. One is, this is going to be weird, but the thing that I actually saw as part of the decline for Gordo was the scene where David Caruso says, "Fuck you," because it was so weird that I took it to be kind of like seeing the mental decline from the perspective of Gordo. I can't be the only one who saw that. Like the way the camera rolls up on him, it's just so weird and different that it's almost like you're seeing say the mental collapse, but it's just so strange, that sequence where he says, "Hey, fuck you," and Gordo's look on his face is so odd that I thought this is part of this is a clear aspect of decline, which I guess may not entirely have been their point.
To me, that scene of the zoom in, it was clearly done. It looked like home video. It looked very grainy, very lo-fi. And
well, there's a reason for that. My understanding is that this is the first digital film in 24p ever made.
What I'm saying is that scene in particular,
looked
like
a documentary shot or something.
It looked so crappy on purpose that it was effective. So I think that definitely was trying to convey a story or emotion in that particular shot. That was an artistic choice. It was almost like there was a fisheye lens too. The angle and everything. It was, like I said, I like the cinematography in the film, and that particularly evoked an emotion that other scenes that wanted to didn't. That was a very purposeful shot. That probably took multiple takes to get the angle and everything right.
Yeah, best comment was they portrayed his mental decline with a decline in filmmaking.
Yeah.
So that's great. So I kind of have a personal story for you that's related to something, well, somewhat, I guess, what we're dancing around here. So as I was watching this movie, one of the things that's going on like in my life, and I don't mean to segue too much because I think this actually has to do with some of the things we've been talking about, is I've been going through my grandparents' estate, their home that they've had for like 60 years, and cleaning things out and finding old family heirlooms and things, right? So no one's living there anymore. And this is a house that's been there for 63 years. My grandfather built it, right? So I have all this like memory in my brain from when I was a kid, little areas of the house that I'm not supposed to go into, the attic. There's almost like this mythical element. I remember, don't go into the attic. There's a monster up there. There's particular things in the garage. And now that I'm 34 and I'm in charge of essentially maintaining the place and doing what I need to do, I've been, going through the garage and pulling out old slides, old photos. So my family has a significant history with mental illness, especially on the female side. So my mom and my aunt had mental disorders. My mom was a schizophrenic, for example. Her mom, my grandmother, was a schizophrenic. And I believe my great-grandmother also had significant mental issues. It's usually on the female side, kind of wigged me out when I got my psych degree. I remember taking a class on schizophrenia, and I was taught that like it can come on late. Even in your like late teens, which wigged me the hell out because I was like in my late teens when I was taking this class. Anyway, so I'm going through the house, and I remember my mom and my aunt telling me stories that my grandmother, when they were growing up, that she would like become a different person and have these episodes where she would get violent to my grandfather, to them. And she would disassociate from reality. My grandfather told me stories about this when I got older. And there's apparently tapes of her, like they have like tapes of her talking and doing. So I'm going through the house, and just to show you, I brought a couple things to kind of show you. So this is my grandmother right there. She was very pretty. She's from Tennessee. And I found a couple notes, actually letters that she wrote while she could see herself having a mental decline. So she would have these moments of lucidity where she was able to reflect on the things that she did. And so as I'm watching session 9, I'm going back and forth to the house, picking up stuff, doing this. And it was really odd. It reminded me of Mike in a lot of ways. I know that sounds crazy. I mean, I didn't sit there with like a reel listening to shit, but I found like a letter called, that she wrote, I guess, for herself, called I Had a Mental Breakdown, which is kind of crazy. It's like 7 pages. And it's about how when she was young, she witnessed her parents being murdered, which is always fun, in their home.
Or this is a short fiction?
No, it's real. My grandmother actually, her sister, so I guess my grand aunt, I guess, her husband broke into their home and shot my great grandparents, shot them to death while they were in bed. So my grandmother saw this, like actually witnessed the entire thing. So for a long time, she just sort of pretended it didn't happen. And so that's what that little thing was about. It's about sort of how she worked through it and just sort of like pretended that didn't happen for her in a lot of ways, right? So I'm going through the house and I'm like, okay, well, that's a really fucking terrifying and awful and all of that stuff. And then I found another letter that she wrote to my grandfather and her kids, my mom and my aunt. And I'm not going to read it to you, but it's essentially like a handwritten letter that talks about the fact that she's starting to realize her disassociation, that it's becoming more prominent, and that it's almost like a suicide letter. It's not written, it's written like that, but she's not going to commit suicide. It's just that she thinks that she's going to, at a certain point, completely lose herself in her own psychoses because nothing's working, right? And I felt that was interesting. I'm sitting here reading this, and there's a kind of reflection on one's own trauma, psychological trauma, one's own recognition of severe psychological issues that sort of that impact other people around them. So, for example, she talks about like how her kids talk about when she's in a particular sort of state, a violent state, as being an entirely different person than the mom that they know. And there's apology after apology about this. It's written very well. And so I'm this is happening as I'm watching session 9, and I'm certainly probably bringing a lot of my own shit into this, but I just thought it was a weird coincidence. I'm going through the house. I literally pulled a mic the last week. I've just been sitting there pulling shit out and finding stuff about my family that was somewhat similar. She was never diagnosed with any kind of dissociative identity disorder. That's the actual term now for multiple personality, but she was diagnosed with a particular type of schizophrenia, as was my mom. But I say all that to say that I want to say two things. I actually think that the idea that we have our own Simon, to a certain extent, is almost scarier than the idea that Simon is this abstract entity that pushes. There's an X-Files episode that's somewhat similar to this, that there's a kind of thing there that makes you do it externally. I like the idea that, I shouldn't say I like the idea. I think it's more terrifying that we all have this capacity to do that, like what Garrett was saying earlier. But also that we have the ability to get to a place where we can reflect on those things, that we can be confronted with those things and think about those things. I don't know, it's an interesting part of who we are as people. I felt that was kind of a weird connection as I was exploring this house. I was like, I'm just going to call this session 10, session 11. Every time I go over, been over there 13 times now. This is session 13. What tapes am I going to find now? Anyway, I thought I would share that with you. I apologize if that's super personal or crazy, but
that's
yeah.
a really moving story. That's yeah. I mean, I hate to bring it back to the film this way, but do you think that might be why you've sort of reversed courses on this film, that you've found this really intense personal connection to it?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe, right? Like, that's a really interesting thing. That's certainly possible. That in the note just consistently says Simon Says everywhere. I don't know what that's about, but
is that fucking true?
Yeah, no,
really?
No. Oh my God, dude, that would be okay. Yeah, that would be. Atheist Noah would suddenly start rethinking things if that was true. That'd be a little weird. But yeah, no,
kind of like knowing, where all of a sudden it's like, tell Noah not to watch session 9, and it's like nobody knew what that meant until 2018.
Yeah, I'd probably be more terrified, because it would tell me there was either she watched session 9 in 1968, or there really is something that this film is modeled after, like a Slender Manian sort of thing. Anyway, yeah,
it's Simon isn't all that uncommon. I mean, there's another explanation right there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That would have wigged me out. Thanks, Jim. Now I'm gonna scour the whole note for anything that says Simon. Yeah, maybe that may have changed my view on it, to be honest with you. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I thought I would share that with you guys. Kind of crazy.
See,
I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Noah. I echo that. And it's funny because during this session, like, you've told stories that I like better than the one I watched, which sort of getting back to the film. But I find that to be really, like, I really do want to write a screenplay of your life. But that's really compelling shit that you had there.
Well, I think it maybe connects to the idea that like guilt, regret, susceptibility to a large extent. Like we're dancing around issues in this film of like allowing the demons in, right? Like that phrase, allowing the demons in, whether those demons are actual, whether they're a part of our own psychological makeup. Really interesting. I mean, and one of the things we haven't talking about is like the idea of the orbital class, the thing that causes the lobotomy, as like, that was used to remove suicidal depression, things like that, to stop a lot of things where people were essentially reflecting on maybe traumatic events, for example, that caused them to go crazy or to have excessive bouts of depression. So really interesting, the removal of memory, the removal of the things that we don't want to think about, disassociation from one's own actions, from the bad things in the world. I think I got those things more the second and third time, maybe because of my own personal shit, and those felt more valuable now. Maybe that's how I would connect that, Jim.
Another thing it does is guilt. It allows you to live with the terrible things you've done, which is part of the reason why they would perform lobotomies on people who were psychopathic and so forth, because they often would have such incredible difficulty coming to terms with what it was that they did, that it tore them apart. You give them a partial or even a full frontal lobotomy, and that goes away. All that guilt, all that remorse about the horrible things you did, gone. Which, when you put it that way, it actually can make it seem like kind of a mercy, even though it's it's considered a highly unethical treatment today. And I'm certainly not arguing the contrary. You can at least see why it is that it was considered standard treatment of care at the time.
Yeah, oddly enough, in one of the notes, and then I asked my grandfather once I found that this was in the notes, she received shock treatment. I didn't even know that was a thing in 68, 69. But I guess they were still doing it back then, so which is kind of crazy. But to your point, yeah. But to your point, Jim, Garrett, there is some similarities in this. This film is similar to some of the other films that we've discussed. I think on the issue of guilt, one can think of maybe Event Horizon, where it's every character has a kind of a guilt schema. Like whenever they talk about the guilt, there's actually only one character that actually verbalizes and articulates his guilt, the Lawrence Fishburne character. But guilt's a huge element in Event Horizon. It's kind of the central theme of the film, just like it is in this one. The Babadook, I think, is similar in the sense that it asks and maybe answers the question, is there really a monster here? Is this my own mental decline, right? That sort of thing. I put in here, and this may be a stretch, Pontypool, in the sense that Pontypool felt aesthetically a little bit like this film, in the sense that it's a very centralized context, a very isolated setting. For the most part, the movie takes place, it's really a cinematography connection. Everything takes place in one setting for the most part. But I think that the heaviest connection might actually be in Triangle. And I don't know if you guys saw Triangle, but we did, Ben Carruth and I did this session on it. Fixation, removal of memory piece specifically, right? The need to dissociate from the past reality, one's own sins, let's say. And very Shutter Island in some sense, actually, now that I think about it. It very similar to Shutter Island, too. We haven't done Shutter Island. I don't know if we're going to. But I don't know. Little bit of similarities related to other films. Do you guys have anything else you want to add about the movie? I guess, actually, before you answer that, let me just explicitly ask the question. I'm going to ask two questions. Just give me a straight shot answer. Do you think this film meant to convey that Simon exists, like as an external entity? Yes or no? And do you find it scarier, the idea that Simon exists, or not? I'll start with Garrett.
Yeah, I think I already answered the second question. I think it's not scarier because I don't believe it. If it's supposed to be this demon, this external ghost monster sort of thing, then I can write it off as just being pure fiction. And pure fiction can be fun. I'm not saying that it should never be done, but it's not as scary for me. So I find it much scarier if he's not real. As to whether or not the film wanted it to be real, if you'd asked me before this conversation, I would have said absolutely not. But now that you got me thinking about it, no, I'm a little bit more ambivalent. So I think that the film is deliberately vague, deliberately ambiguous about it. And that can be fun too. Although personally, I suspect I probably would like it more if it ambiguity is a good thing. I don't want to say I don't like ambiguity, but I do like my reading better. So,
got it. What about you, Jim?
I'm very similar to Garrett. I think the film is deliberately trying to suggest that Simon is a real thing, though. That's I think where Garrett and I differ. I think that otherwise the satanic bullshit in the beginning doesn't need to be there. Otherwise, there's little connection between the Mike versus the mystery conflict and the Gordon versus himself conflict. Otherwise, those are like just two separate movies. So I think that Simon is implied within the context of the film to be a real thing, to be an entity. And that's partially why I like the stories we've told tonight more than I like the movie. I like I agree with Garrett's answer to the second question, that is far more scary that tomorrow I could accidentally just snap and hit a student or a significant other or a friend, and that could happen. Like, that scares the shit out of me. And that's not a real reflection of who I am. And yet it's a thing I did. That would be terribly compelling and terribly frightening. And so if this movie had sort of sunk its teeth into that conflict, I would probably be telling a different story. And perhaps that's one of the reasons in which we disagree about this film, that you guys are seeing that conflict a lot more clearer than I am.
Yeah.
So that's how I'd respond to those questions. Go ahead, Jonah.
Jonah, I want you to answer Noah's questions, but I want to interject there really quickly because I think Jim set something up that I want to talk about later. So I want to make sure we put a note in it. There's a feminist interpretation that we can make of this film, and I want to come back to that. So I want to make that explicit. I don't know if it works after Jonah answers the questions. We can look at it that way.
Okay, so I think that Simon. I don't think that Simon is real as in an entity. Ooh, I'm Simon, like Simon's coming down the hall. It's more of an ether that permeates through all of them as the darkness within us. Simon is asbestos embodied, I'll say. So by that I'm going to say no, Simon's not real. But if he were real, that would make the movie much more terrible for me, because I don't believe, as you should know by now, I only like naturalistic horrors where we're the darkness, we're the demons. It's what we do to each other that's scary, not things beyond us that control us. It's the actions that are scary, not.
That's why Compliance and The Hunt are some of the scariest films to you for that exact reason, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's not what caused it to happen. It's the fact that you did it. So in the Compliance example, Simon would be the caller, and the people who do the actions, you know what I mean? The fact that they obeyed Simon is basically so yeah. So no, I don't think Simon's real. We have to define what real is, and if my own definition, no. But if Simon were an actual entity, embodied ghost or spirit, that would cheapen the entire film for me. So I hope that Simon's not real. Let's keep it ambiguous. Let's keep it open and say we don't know, maybe. And each are having our own answers that we can defend makes a much more interesting conversation than just having a deus ex machina of, oh, Simon's a ghost, Simon's real, like that, because that's inconsistent with the rest of the film. So to have him be real at the end is just lazy writing. The fact that he's not real is more consistent with the story.
So this is one of the few things we may all agree on, or most of us agree on, which is kind of cool. So in case you guys don't know, we always have a segment that's meant to piss off our viewers. It's called Say Something Feminist. And the reason we do this is we've noticed a distinct trend in all of our film reviews. Accidentally, whenever we say anything about a feminist perspective, or really when we talk about women at all in cinema, we inevitably get all of our dislikes and hate comments. And so we just decided to embrace that because we love you guys so much. So we're calling this segment Say Something Feminist. And I'm going to hand it over to Garrett because I couldn't give anything to say from a feminist perspective in this movie, but Garrett has, so I'm handing this off to him.
Yeah, it's at this point again, which I lament that it's just four guys talking about this film. But it is notable that, again, reflecting on my own experience watching it, what scared me was the prospect that I might snap and kill somebody. it never ever occurred to me that my wife might snap and kill me. That's something that doesn't scare me, and for basically statistically pretty good reasons, because men are much more likely to kill their wives than wives are to kill their husbands. That's not to say that doesn't happen, of course it does, but the story of the man snapping and killing his wife is something that to me hits home, even though I have never ever hit my wife, never had felt the impulse to hit my wife. My just simple awareness of how human nature and how men and testosterone and all that shit works, it's something that can resonate with me when I see it happen in a film. So it's not for nothing that basically all the characters really in the film are men, with the exception of Mary Hobbs, I suppose, and we have a couple of lines from Gordo's wife. But so the fact that this is a film about men told from a male's perspective, and we are a male audience talking about it, and it isn't until I heard Jim talking about it that it dawned on me that, if a woman watching this film might find something very, very different, scary about it. Not the prospect that they're going to snap, but the prospect that someone they love might snap and kill them. So that for me, I think, is a very interesting reversal in how I, naively with my male gaze looked at this film. So those are my sort of feminist thoughts.
I'm gonna go off and jump before anyone jumps on something, because this is so close to what Garrett's saying. I once joked that Die Hard is really a film about urban architecture, cultural relativism, and marital misgivings. This film, Session 9, only touches on the domestic abuse issue, and it's, oh, poor me, I hit my wife, I feel so bad. Well, what about the wife? We never get her perspective. This whole movie could be about domestic abuse. The whole movie could be about him coming home drunk and just beating the shit out of her. That could be the whole movie, and that would be a really fucked up horror movie. I mean, that would be terrible. So, that would be really intense. And then he kills his wife at the end, but we don't get her perspective. So there's no feminist voices in this movie. We don't get the point.
There are no female voices.
The wife's story. What if the wife was a fucking bitch? We don't know. I know what I'm saying. Like, what if she pushed him to do it?
Wait, what? I mean,
the MGTOW guys out there are like, fuck yeah, let's make that movie.
We're not set up to believe that.
No, I know, but I'm just saying. First of all, let me disclaimer. That's not my belief. I'm just. So what I said, don't take it in the context of I endorse that kind of behavior, because I absolutely do not. What I'm saying is we don't get the perspective of the woman, and it's particularly in a domestic abuse situation, that's very unhealthy. And it's sort of the fact that we're feeling sorry for the guy who's hitting his wife, but not feeling sorry for the wife is really unhealthy. It's not balanced.
So let me push back just a little with you guys on this and see what you guys think. So could we make the counter argument that since Mary Hobbs serves as the primary analog for Gordo and the things that he is going through, I mean, what would we say then of that? That she's sort of the initial fabric that's threading Gordo's narrative, the things that we're pulling from his story, like the fact that she's first, that she starts, and that we're pulling from her to interpret Gordo. Would that be sort of a counter maybe to this just being about 5 dicks in a asbestos infested?
I just want to add something. No, this is sideways to what Noah was saying. It's parallel to what Noah said. It doesn't address your point, but it's there. There's also the issue of infidelity, but it's just 5 bros talking about, oh, you cheated, you took my girl from me, man. What the fuck? What if the woman liked the other guy better? I'm just saying there's this whole issue of infidelity, but the woman, it's as if the guys own the women. That's really an unfair balance. Women have no autonomy. They have no say. This movie could have been improved if this movie was made in 2018, have one woman on the asbestos crew who just keeps them straight.
I can feel the white knight comments coming on. We had the same issue with The Thing and all the male voices. Go ahead, Garrett.
No, I actually disagree with that. I think I mean, the film as sort of a male perspective is part of it. I can't say it's deliberate per se, but I think I want to be able to view the film as I want to be able to view just about anything through a feminist lens to see what that illuminates. but I don't know that this film would be improved if there was a woman on the crew.
Right, she would be the token girl, which would make it worse.
And yeah, tokenism is always a problem too, but not even that. I mean, you could have her fleshed out and robust and so forth. But I mean, I think part of what the film is, again, the reality of what the film is trying to reflect is male psychology. You're right that we don't see the wife's perspective, and again, that may or may not be deliberate. But I think the whole blue collar men working together, being bros together, being tough, going into the scary place, and that is sort of a reality I think that they're trying to put their finger on in some ways.
But it's not just male psychology, Garrett. It's psychology. I mean, Mary Hobbs is going through something similar in her story, right? So it's pulling from the Hobbesian. That's going to be used in a very different circle with you, Garrett, as a philosopher. I apologize. It's pulling from the Mary Hobbesian sort of story in order to give light to the Gordo story. I mean.
Yeah, but also notice the differences between Mary Hobbs' story and Gordon's story. Gordo snaps because of pressure from work and because of problems in his marriage. Mary Hobbs snaps because she was being abused.
Well, she dropped. Yeah, that's right. You're right. And that she dropped a doll, which has.
Yeah, that was the trigger. That was the trigger.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
You asked us to say something feminist. And so we did. Yeah. The lack of female voices in the film is something feminist that we said. So
yeah, where's our female co-host? See, this is what happens every time you're not here, Shara. If you're watching.
As long as we got the men's rights activist dislikes on our channel from this this sort of side quest into feminism, I think we've done our job.
I just want to say I just added to the spreadsheet In the Company of Men, the Neil LaBute film, which is, again, it's a social horror that is very misogynistic and is great for feminist discussion. I don't know how many of you have seen that, but it is a brutal movie about men abusing women, not abusing women in murderous ways, just psychological abuse.
Does it say something about you that it only took this discussion for you to instantly add that to our film list happily?
Well, no, it's just because I think about feminist films, and I didn't know that this was part of our repertoire.
I know. I'm totally messing with you. Maybe. Okay. Do you guys have anything else you want to add? Are there any trails we didn't go down that you may want to explore in the next 15, 20 minutes before we wrap up?
No, my notes sheet is cleared. I said everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, mine was too. The last thing I had was feminist perspective ? And that is why we have Garrett. So
I hope I didn't paint myself in a bad picture when I was sort of.
No, we know that you beat women. It's a fact. We all know this. It's okay.
No, not at all.
Whenever I hit my wife, I say, you're going to get another Jonah. And I call it like a verb. Like, yeah, so no, you're good. We all got you.
Okay, so this clip is going to be taken out of context.
We can't do sarcasm on the internet, okay? It will be taken out of context. It will no. That's not a thing. Go ahead, Garrett. I need to make that joke.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah, is that clip could easily be taken out of context, and hopefully we're not so big that someone's looking to take us down a peg just yet by decontextualizing us. But I will wrap up my feminist comments by saying that I don't think that that's a flaw. It is distinctively a film about men from male perspectives. Maybe wouldn't resonate with women the same way. Again, it's a shame that we don't have a female voice here to check and compare off of. But if you were to remake the film with a woman character prominent front and center, at a minimum, it would be a very different film. Not necessarily a worse film, but it wouldn't be this film.
So, have you heard of the Bechdel test?
Yeah, Bechdel. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Bechdel test. Yeah.
Okay, I'll say it for what it is for the audience, for the sake of the audience. It's basically pick a movie where two women are talking, and if they are not talking about a man, then or sex, then they pass the Bechdel test. In this movie, I don't believe there's a male equivalent, because men are generally better written characters than women, and so men will talk about sports or cars or the plot. But in this movie, where it's just men talking about women and sex, I feel like there has to be a male equivalent for that.
Well,
Bechdel. I'll just do a real quick on Bechdel test, and if you want to add something, Garrett, go ahead. Bechdel test is not one of the ways in which Bechdel test has been misapplied is it's supposed to be a evaluation of the medium as a whole. So it's what percentage of films pass the Bechdel test, not this film is bad because this individual film doesn't pass the Bechdel test. And it's two named female characters talking about something other than a man. So I wouldn't necessarily hit this film for not passing the Bechdel test. What I would hit the industry for is having the majority of films not pass the Bechdel test. That said, I do want to bring up one wonderful thing in the chat that one Gray Chaos said, lol, let's just wait for the all-female reboot coming in 2019. That will surely pass the Bechdel test once we get there. We just have to wait a year.
Yeah, that movie is going to be about how all of their husbands beat them.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, no, Jim, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's almost, and I would also add that there are some, staunchly feminist films that fail the Bechdel test. Unfortunately, I can't name any of them off the top of my head because I can't remember. But there have been lists and essays written on this that I've seen. Yeah, I think it's important to keep the Bechdel test in context. As to whether or not there should be a male equivalent, yeah, I don't know. I can't really say I see the need for that per se.
Yeah, the purpose of the Bechdel test was to prove how male-driven the industry is. So if there's a male equivalent of it, then that comes from the narrative of how female-driven the industry is, and that's simply not the case from all empirical data. That said, I will say I've seen far more strong performances by actresses this year than I have by actors, but we are only in August of this film year. I can name 3 Best Actress nominees right off the top of my head right now, and I can't do the same for Best Actor nominees, but we'll see. Oscar season is still coming upon us.
All right. Did you guys have anything else you want to add before we wrap it up? If not, I'll kind of tidy up, give my summary, give my score, and then we'll go down the list. You guys good?
Yes. I'll say one last sort of quick thing. In keeping with my earlier comments about sort of psychology, I think that there is a genre of horror film here. Not just necessarily psychological horror or maybe horror having to do with asylums or institutions or something like that. I've seen a lot of them, and I think that this one really does sort of hits everything that I like about them and only a few things that I dislike about them. So, last week when talking about Bug, I mentioned Stonehurst Asylum sort of in passing. That's also a Brad Anderson film. Also set in an asylum, and it's a good movie, but it's not a great movie in the way I think Session 9 is.
What's your favorite David Caruso role?
Honestly, I don't know David Caruso from all that much, so it's going to be this. But I think I've seen him in this, in CSI.
NYPD Blue.
NYPD Blue, yeah, I saw a couple episodes
Jade,
of that.
have you seen Jade with Chaz Palminteri? And
I know of it. I have not seen it.
Okay.
I've seen it.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't say I have terribly high opinion of David Caruso as an actor, but I think the "fuck you" line notwithstanding, I think he's solid in this.
I will say of all the "fuck you," like there have been better "fuck yous" in cinema history. There should be
Tremors. Tremors comes to mind.
A fuck you. What's that? No.
Tremors comes to mind.
There should be a fuck you montage of like the best fuck you. There should be an Oscar or Academy Award category like best fuck you.
This would definitely be up there. My God, this would definitely be up there. Yeah, so I'll summarize my spiel on this is that I dug this film the last couple of times I saw it. I liked it a lot more. It was kind of fun to explore maybe why I think I liked it a lot more. I think Jim prompted a really good question that's kind of cool to think about with my own personal shit. And maybe I do that with all my films, did with It Follows, did it with Let the Right One In. Just I bring my shit to the table, guys, and there's horror movies that I sort of interact with my own stuff. But that's kind of cool. It's why we do this podcast to a large extent. At least that's why I do it. So I did not like this film when I first saw it. But it's because I missed certain things. I think I didn't understand some of the ending. I didn't care enough to look it up to care. I'm gonna pass it up. And I'm glad I watched it again. This was not only that, but one of the things I didn't say is this is one of those films like Pontypool that I could just put on at night and fall asleep very easily. And that's not a slight to the film. It's not like, I don't mean that to be a kind of insult. It's just the setting is so continual. It's isolated. It's almost like I don't know, whenever there's a movie where there's one continuous setting like this, I feel like I can, for the most part, zone out. And if I allow myself to, I do that with Pontypool sometimes. If it's raining or something, I can't fall asleep, I got insomnia, I throw on Pontypool. I feel like I could do this the same way with this film. And I do not mean that as a slight at all. I think the more that you look at the dialogue and the interaction between the characters, I think that you start to see the value of this film. The acting is fantastic. I liked the music, despite what some of us thought. I liked the ambient / dark ambient sort of vibe that was in this. Felt like it was interspersed enough to not be dominant, but also to not be oblivious. I thought it was there. It was there just enough to make me feel something, which was cool. I think where the film had its flaw was it was so slow. Maybe my criticism was that it was such a slow burn that I really had to earn the ending, and the ending, what I earned in the ending didn't give me the amount that I wanted. But I like the fact that it turned some of the tropes that I was thinking were going to happen on their head. So kind of mixed feelings. Definitely like it more the second and third time around. If we were going to score this film out of 10 all around, I'd probably give this 6.5. 7 around there. Can't really go higher than that. I rewatchability I'm still playing with. Feel like I could watch it again and without zoning out and even get a lot out of it. So let's say 6.5 overall for my score.
Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, go for it.
I did not like this movie. There were things I liked about it, like the cinematography, but this discussion made me understand it and appreciate it and like it more, which brings the final score up. And I'm being very generous here around it and say 5. Maybe, no, 5. Yeah, 5. It's a perfectly average film, but I definitely wouldn't watch it again. Or if I did, I would need some time and space to forget what I saw and then watch it on a good quality rip.
You need a Blu-ray. I'm going to send you the Blu-ray. Watch it. Your score will go up to a 7. We'll call it even.
Right, and then we'll do this podcast again. And then,
okay. So I think I've been fairly clear about my complaints about the film throughout the podcasts, and so not to rehash them again.
So you're scoring this a 10, right? That's what 10?
No, it's
okay. All right. Damn.
2 out of 5, so that's 4, I guess. I think there's I like the stories that we told tonight a lot more than I like the film. So I guess that'll be my closer. As I said, I've already sort of given my dislikes and my negatives for the film. So I'll let the guy who likes this film the most, and the one who introduced me to this film and introduced all of us to this film, I'll let Garrett close.
So there's a phrase that Jim uses often, which he did not use tonight, but I think he was angling for it, which is that sounds like a great story. I'd love to see a movie about that.
I almost did it like 3 times tonight, and I was like, "Oh, that's too much of an asshole phrase."
I love it. I think it's a great phrase. I've taken to using it myself on occasion. So yeah, and I think that's fair, right? I mean, it's always a fair response, assuming it's sincere. But yeah, I had a different response. Like, again, I've also been unambiguous. I love this movie. I think I have difficulty thinking of a horror movie that does a better job capturing both sort of abnormal psychology in a right way and the history of psychology, even though it's obviously not far from comprehensive, but just touching on a couple of things. But it's a couple of interesting and important things, as well as horrifying things. I think that context, I think the reality of the story that inspired Gordo's character and the reality of Danvers State Mental Hospital as an actual place are something that really ground this film for me. I think Danvers hospital as a location is just absolutely horrifying. I think the fact that it's almost all real with very little set dressing is horrifying. I think the cinematography and the music work wonderfully. Some, the little touches, the effects, the audio recordings, all of that, make this a smash success for me. I will grant that there are some weaknesses. The fuck you, obviously, the somewhat superfluousness of Mike's character toward in the third and arguably the second act as well. So it's certainly not a perfect movie. On a 10 scale, I'd give it a 9, I guess. So on a 5 scale, that's a 4.5. It's not flawless, but it is damn good, and it gets a very high recommendation for me to anyone who likes horror movies, especially psychological horror movies.
Yeah, it's so much better than most of the crap that comes out in the genre. I mean, it's scores above most of the stuff that comes out today. I would agree with that. Okay, well, cool, guys. Thank you for taking the time to do this podcast with us. We had a good amount of people in the chat tonight. It was great to see you guys. Join us in 2 weeks from tonight. So that is September 2nd, Sunday, September 2nd, 6 p.m., same time. We will be doing Donnie Darko. And my goal, guys, is to get everyone who joins the podcast for Donnie Darko to be high as we do the analysis. Even if you've never had weed, it doesn't matter if it's not legal in your state, we will get you high for this, because that is the only way to watch Donnie Darko. So we'll be doing Donnie Darko 2 weeks from tonight. Check us out on social media. If you haven't seen our YouTube channel, a lot of the movies we referenced tonight, we've done discussions on. So Bug, Triangle, Event Horizon, Babadook, all of those things are on their channel. We're also on iTunes, SoundCloud,
Compliance.
Stitcher, all that. Compliance, Jonas Film Compliance for sure. So those are all there for you to check out. Check out our Facebook, Instagram. We're basically everywhere. We exist everywhere. We're like Simon. We're the Simon of social media. We're everywhere. So yeah, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for Donnie Darko. And if you don't join us, fuck you.